I am the beautiful, strong, and tragic hero of a story destined to be saved. On the day I married the heroine, I finally heard the voice. Congratulations, host. Rescue of target Julian Hayes is a success. I lower my head, saying nothing, a dark amusement playing in my eyes as I stared at the wedding band in my hand. Your game is over. Now it's my turn. In the heart of a hall overflowing with flowers, I stood at the altar in my tuxedo. A chorus of blessings and cheerful jeers buzzed in my ears. Before me, her face flushed with a gentle, shy blush, was the woman I had dated for 5 years, Sophie Miller. I gazed at her, my voice thick with emotion, and delivered my vow without hesitation. I promise to protect you for the rest of my life. The second my words faded, a synthetic voice crackled to life. Congratulations, host. Rescue of target Julian Hayes is a success. I couldn't stop my shoulders from trembling as I bowed my head, looking for all the world like a man overcome with emotion at finally marrying the woman he loves. I'm crying. This is what true love looks like. Sophie is so lucky, oh my God. Where do you find a man like that? He's so in love with her. What they didn't know was that I wasn't crying from joy. I was trembling with an excitement that was close to killing me. From the day I was born, I knew I was the hero of a scripted narrative, the broken, beautiful man waiting for his savior. My destiny was to be rescued by the story's heroine. But for some reason, my life had been perfectly smooth. Until Sophie appeared when I was 5 years old. Target Julian Hayes detected. Script error warning, switching rescue target, or forcing script correction. I still remember her in a yellow and white party dress, giving me a warm, sunny smile. But behind that innocent, radiant face was a will of iron, and she chose, without a moment's hesitation, to take control of my life. And for 20 years, the game, with Sophie as the main player, has finally ended. Now it's my turn. The next morning, I feigned sleep, listening silently as Sophie and the system laid out their plans. Host, don't forget what you promised me after the mission was completed. Sophie sounded annoyed. The system had been nagging her ever since the wedding yesterday. She replied dismissively. It's just a body, isn't it? With today's technology, what can't you get? Besides, now that the mission was complete, Julian was completely devoted to her. I stretched, rolling over to wrap my arms around her waist. I buried my face in her neck like a big golden retriever, murmuring affectionately, Honey, what are you talking about? Having a dream? As I spoke, my hands began to wander, a perfect picture of a newlywed couple's cloying affection. A blush spread across Sophie's face, and she turned to hug me back. If nothing else, Julian's technique and his body more than lived up to her fantasies. Far better than any of the pretty boys she met on the side. Honey, I want to buy an android, she cooed, her cloying voice piercing my ears. I fought back a wave of nausea, pressing my lips to her cheek. Of course, I whispered, kissing her. But you have to feed me first. She turned to me with a bashful look, completely missing the stick of incense I had just lit by the bedside. I'd always known that the system only went into a blackout mode when Sophie was occupied. Only then did it lose its ability to monitor me. Pulling a random shirt from the closet, I left Sophie writhing on the bed. Thinking about the system's request, my hands paused as I knotted my tie. An android? Isn't that a kind of person, too? That afternoon, Sophie came downstairs in her pajamas, yawning. A line of representatives from a robotics firm stood in the living room, waiting for her to finish breakfast so they could discuss the details. A rep stepped forward, holding out a tablet. Ma'am, do you have any specific functional requirement for the android? The face and body can be completely customized, of course. The moment she finished speaking, I heard the system's excited voice in the background. Host, I want your face. Sensing it had been too eager, it reined in its emotion. Your face has been upgraded by me. It's flawless. Only a face like that is worthy of my status. Sophie's hand, holding a piece of croissant, froze. A thoughtful look crossed her face. Her face? An android that looked exactly like her? Did that make sense? Don't you want to break into Hollywood? I'll use the last of my energy to grant you an irresistible charisma ability. Seeing her hesitation, the system went all in with its temptation. Sophie was sold. Marrying me had already made her one of the most envied wives in our social circle. But it wasn't enough. She craved the feeling of all eyes on her, and Hollywood was the perfect stage. Using your face? The representative was hesitant. She'd never had a request like this. Technology was advanced, but most people were unnerved by the idea of an android looking identical to them. Sophie was the first. Are you questioning me? The sharp tone of her voice made the rep wave her hands in immediate denial. Watching Sophie's arrogant display, I raised an eyebrow. She played the part of a gentle, virtuous girl so perfectly in front of our peers. Everyone said I had married an angel. Only I knew just how venomous she truly was. For the past 20 years, that so-called system had expended countless amounts of energy to help her maintain the script. I was intensely curious. Without the system propping her up, would Sophie's life continue to be so smooth? A shipping crate nearly 6 feet tall was carried into the villa by workers. The moment it was opened, there was a collective gasp. The maids huddled in a corner, whispering nervously. That looks exactly like the missus. Holy crap, it's like they're twins. What was she thinking? Ordering this? Isn't she afraid? What's there to be afraid of? It's just an android. It can't, do that. The moment the dust cover was lifted, I felt Sophie stiffen beside me, her brow furrowed. The resemblance was too uncanny. She had assumed that even a high-fidelity android couldn't be a 100% match. I suppressed a sneer, feigning curiosity. This is the android you wanted? That's right. Sophie recovered quickly, clinging to my arm and putting on a cute act. I want you to be able to see me all the time. From now on, she'll be your personal assistant. What do you think? Am I smart or what? I gave a helpless smile, patting her head and praising her indulgently. Our Sophie is the smartest. Hardly. This was just a new deal she'd struck with the system. I had personally heard it tempting her in her mind. Host, you can place me by Julian's side. That way, none of those other women will dare get close to him. Sophie had been hesitant at first, but then she figured, what could an android possibly do? Everyone would just assume it was her spending every day with Julian. And with her link to the system, she could monitor him at all times. Everything was proceeding exactly as I'd planned. 20 years of having everything go her way had made Sophie incredibly simple-minded. She never considered that the greatest difference between a human and an android is thought. And where there is thought, there is greed. Good morning, Mr. Hayes, Mrs. Hayes. I gave a casual nod, leading the system-inhabited android beside me toward the executive elevator. Wow, is that Mrs. Hayes? She's absolutely stunning. No way. That's a face sculpted by the gods. Ah, my favorite couple is so cute. Does anyone get it? The receptionist had been staring and whispering since we walked into the building. I glanced sideways without drawing attention. The android's face wore a distinctly human expression of smug satisfaction. Its face was a hyper-realistic prosthetic I had spent a fortune creating. With the right control, it could perfectly replicate every human function. It was even more perfect than a human. So this is what it feels like to be the center of attention. Not bad at all. I lowered my head, a cold smile on my lips. Of course it's not bad. Hayes Corp has the strictest management. Without my permission, who would dare gossip about me right in front of my face? It was all an act. The only question was who was more committed to their role. Once in my office, my secretary diligently brought in an array of snacks, fruit, and a new tablet. System, is Julian in the office? As I was signing a contract, I heard Sophie's voice calling out in her mind. The system, lounging on the sofa completely engrossed in a video game, glanced up at me carelessly. Yeah, he's busy. No time to worry about you picking up guys at the club. Go hook up if you want. Just don't interrupt my game. Back when it was just a system, it had always wanted to play games. I thoughtfully tapped my fingers on the back of my chair. Sophie's taste for handsome men hadn't changed in 20 years. But where's the fun in enjoying things alone? It must be so boring for the system, cooped up in the office all day. In a club pulsing with strobe lights, Sophie danced wildly in a tight black slip dress. The moment the music stopped, a male model with a lollipop stick dangling from his lips tipped her chin up. Just by looking, I could tell the stick had been shortened. Whoa, kiss her. The crowd clapped and cheered. This club was notoriously wild, a playground for the city's elite. Everyone wore masks, allowing themselves to descend into debauchery without consequence. Sophie wore a half mask, her eyes hazy and unfocused. She yanked the model toward her by his collar, pressing a credit card into his hand that he gladly accepted. When they broke apart, a trail of saliva connected their lips. I stood on the second-floor balcony, watching it all unfold in silence. Beside me sat a man with gold-rimmed glasses. Dr. Eris Thorne, the lead designer of the android now possessed by the system. He was also the most brilliant and unorthodox madman in his field. He watched the Naudi-activated android with amusement, making a casual joke. Mr. Hayes, your wife certainly knows how to have a good time. With that, he pulled out his laptop and began typing furiously. Something this fun. Why should she get to enjoy it all by herself? A moment later, the android, which had been forcibly shut down, suddenly activated and strode toward the center of the stage. What the hell? Isn't that Julian Hayes' wife? She's bold, huh? Not even wearing a mask. Maybe she's here to catch him cheating. The crowd was full of the rich and powerful, but even they were stunned. Sophie, who had been getting cozy with the model in a dark corner, was drawn out by the shouts, but it was too late. The android wearing her face had already finished a scorching dance on the main stage. Sophie stared at the system on stage, her face twisted with fury. The system, having just regained its senses, had no time to think. Handsome men and beautiful women were flocking to its side, and a highly advanced sensory body I had designed for it was providing a uniquely intense experience. Tonight was destined to be a sleepless one. Hashtag Sophie Miller spotted at Club Nocturne. Hashtag Julian and Sophie on the rocks. Hashtag Sophie Miller sultry dance. By morning, the trending topics were flooded with headlines about last night. Sophie sat on the sofa, scrolling through the comments. Damn, this girl is wild. 666, all flash, no class. She looks cheap and plays dirty. My heart breaks for that handsome CEO. Poor guy. Everyone calm down. Julian is in my bed right now, cries eyes out. As far as the eye could see, public opinion was a landslide against her. Everyone who was anyone knew what kind of place Club Nocturne was. No one who went there was clean. Sophie's expression was grim. She looked at the system coldly. You made this mess. You fix it. Her tone was that of a high and mighty princess reprimanding a servant. The system, which had felt a flicker of guilt, now felt a surge of annoyance. Was there any part of Sophie's current life that it hadn't helped create? If it weren't for the system, would she have ever married Julian Hayes? Did she really believe in fairy tales about destined lovers? Just tell everyone I'm your twin sister. What's the big deal? If we clarify it together, who would dare say anything? The system's words were arrogant, but Sophie was tempted. There was a reality show she'd been eyeing that required her to participate with a sibling. This was the perfect setup. Besides, the system was tied to her. It wouldn't dare betray her. What she didn't know was that the show she so desperately wanted to join, Double Take, was a trap I had personally set for her. Welcome to the game. Sophie, my goddess, fly high Sophie, will always be with you. At the filming location for Double Take, fans holding banners shouted with excitement. Sophie stepped out of the car, holding the hem of her dress, and waved gently to the crowd. After she held a press conference to clarify the situation, the public not only believed she hadn't been at the club, but also dug up old videos showcasing her talents. The internet's affection was fickle and fast. She had already become a rising star with considerable fame. Sophie was basking in it. She was addicted to the feeling of being the center of attention. The system standing next to her, however, was not pleased. Its hearing was superhuman, and it could pick up the whispers of the crew members from a distance. So that's Sophie's sister, Annie. She really looks identical to Sophie, but she sure doesn't live up to her name's peaceful meaning. Hardly peaceful. Bet we'll see her at Club Nocturne next. A crew member holding a camera nudged his colleague with a smirk. The system glared at the back of Sophie's head, which was blocking its view. Its final ability had been exchanged for irresistible charisma for Sophie, but now it was starting to regret that deal. Unseen by anyone, the system's eyes flashed white for a split second. In that instant, some of the fans in the crowd suddenly felt their fervor cool, wondering why they had been so obsessed with Sophie in the first place. Double Take was a rustic living reality show designed to make pampered celebrities experience real life. To stir the pot, they had also invited their siblings, creating a perfect storm of comparisons and chaos. And just like that, the director announced the night's biggest challenge. Each pair of guests will be responsible for cooking their own dinner. The words hung in the air. Sophie, who had never lifted a finger in her life, froze. She had never known a day of hardship. After marrying me, she was treated like a princess. What? No way. We're both disasters in the kitchen, cried Leo Sterling, a fellow celebrity, alongside his younger brother. We don't know how to cook either, said the other pair of sisters, Chloe and Zoe Clark, shrugging helplessly. Leave it to the director to spice things up. Can't wait to watch celebrities eat dirt for dinner. Lol, what kind of garbage show is this? What if our Leo starves? Yeah, and Zoe is still sick. Why did they make her come here to suffer? The mindless fan comments attacked the production team, making the once confident director look uneasy. Leo Sterling, a young heartthrob with a shock of blonde hair, turned to Sophie curiously. Sophie, can you cook? After all, Sophie was famous for being gentle and talented, and she often posted pictures of her homemade, gourmet meals on social media. He had no idea that her version of cooking was sprinkling some garnish on dishes prepared by the maids. His question put her on the spot. She lowered her head, a flash of annoyance in her eyes. When she looked up again, her face was adorned with a gentle smile. A little. I'm not very good, so I hope you all won't mind. The live chat exploded like fireworks. My boy won't have to suffer. Sophie is a true lady. She really can do everything. That Julia Hayes guy, how does he deserve to eat so well? The other two pairs of siblings on set cheered. The show was broadcasting live, and I was quite curious to see how Sophie would handle this. As evening fell, Sophie emerged from her room in a white floral dress, her hair in a low ponytail. She walked straight to the kitchen to prepare the ingredients, even flashing a gentle smile at the camera. Hearing the noise, Leo and Zoe sheepishly entered the kitchen to help, dragging their respective siblings with them. The small kitchen was soon packed. Oh, for crying out loud. This production team has no soul. Chloe Clark yelped, startled by the flopping fish and live shrimp on the counter. The prep table was covered with the most difficult seafood ingredients imaginable. Vocal live eels. Oh my god, I can't even imagine what a kitchen nightmare this is going to be. The director is going way too far. A moment later, the live chat paused, then suddenly changed direction. Sis, you are the sis. You call that knowing a little about cooking? More like a milli little bit, as in a master. On screen, Sophie, now in an apron, stunned a fish with a single blow from her knife, then descaled and gutted it in a few swift movements. She handled the ingredients with practiced ease, leaving the other four watching in stunned silence. Are we just in the way here? Zoe murmured. This woman didn't look like she needed any help. Of course she didn't need help. With the programming of a perfect android and the processing power of the system, a simple meal was nothing. The real Sophie, however, hiding in her room, was probably having a miserable time. Before long, a 6-course meal with a soup was brought to the table. The 4 helpers had done nothing more than juice a watermelon as instructed by Sophie. Now, they sat at the table like well-behaved children, waiting to eat. It was then that someone finally noticed that Annie hadn't come out all afternoon. The system wiped its damp hands on its apron, giving an embarrassed smile. My sister is probably still sleeping. I'll go up and get her. I raised an eyebrow in amusement. This system was more cunning than I'd thought. With that kind of manipulative skill, 80 Sophies wouldn't stand a chance against it. Half an hour later, Sophie finally trudged down from her room. She had actually fallen asleep, and her notoriously bad temper upon waking had led to a huge tantrum upstairs. Now, she walked down the stairs with a sullen expression, yawning. This girl? What's with the diva act? They waited half an hour for her. The food's cold. Does she really think she's some kind of princess? They came from the same mother. How can it be so different? It wasn't just the fans who were annoyed. The 4 others at the table felt a little strange. Anyone would be irritated after working hard all day only to have to wait for someone to eat. But Sophie didn't care. She was playing the role of Annie now. The moment she sat down, her brow furrowed. Seriously, don't you know I'm allergic to watermelon juice? She snapped. It was her habit to have a glass of juice before a meal. The system, still in its apron, opened its mouth slightly but said nothing, looking utterly wronged. That was enough for the resident good guy, Leo Sterling. He picked up the glass of watermelon juice in front of him and downed it in one go. Refreshing, he exclaimed. This watermelon from the show is super sweet. Then he turned to the others. Everyone dig in. This smells amazing. My boy doesn't put up with anyone's crap. Help, I'm dying. Who knew the sweet boy was so savage? Is it just me, or is this kind of cute? The sweet boy protecting his big sis, you know? Sophie's face turned livid. She had lived a charmed life and had never been humiliated like this. She slammed her chopsticks down and stormed away from the table. The others exchanged awkward glances while the system silently shoveled plain rice into its mouth. Everyone sympathized with it. Fueled by the production team, the news of Sophie's bratty sister quickly started trending. Sophie, hiding behind her sister's identity, had no problem ruining that reputation. In fact, the more she acted out, the more harmless and victimized the system appeared. In the end, everyone would just think she, the real Sophie, was the gentle and virtuous one. Comforted by this thought, Sophie happily committed to being a lazy brat in her room. In just 3 days on the reality show, the name, Annie Miller, had become synonymous with being universally disliked. She was not only lazy and entitled, but also threw princess-like tantrums. System, you're an absolute genius. In just a few days, my social media followers have gone up by 3 million. After the show wrapped, Sophie sat in the airport lounge, scrolling through her feed and marveling internally. The comments section under her account was a sea of praise, filling her with immense satisfaction. Despite only being a 3-day show, Sophie's fans had already organized a fan club to greet her at the airport. Pink and white light-up signs illuminated the terminal. The system, trailing behind her, was completely ignored, even drawing a few whispered insults. "Host, do you want to be even more famous?" As they walked, the system's voice suddenly popped in her head. Sophie was a little confused, but out of habit, she trusted it and nodded without hesitation. A strange glint flashed in the system's eyes. It suddenly lunged forward with its suitcase, ramming it into Sophie, who was wearing a white dress. Ah! A pained cry, followed by a nonstop barrage of camera flashes. Half an hour later, in a VIP hospital room, Sophie munched on snacks while watching her online popularity soar. She nodded in approval. Her social media was flooded with messages of sympathy. "OMG, what a terrible sister. That was pure jealousy. My poor Sophie. She was bleeding so much. I'm furious. Can't she be charged with assault?" Back at the airport, the system shove had sent both of them straight to the top of the trending charts. An incident involving intentional harm between family members attracted attention far beyond her usual fanbase. Sophie's wound, of course, was just an illusion created by the system. The incident catapulted her to A-list levels of fame. As she lay in her hospital bed, feigning injury and reveling in her success, she didn't notice the system slipping out and heading to Club Nocturne. At the entrance to the club, the system made no effort to hide its face. Not far away, a familiar blonde figure was squatting in a corner. "Go, don't go, go," Leo Sterling was muttering to himself, tearing petals off a small daisy. The online friend he'd known for 3 years had asked to meet him here at Club Nocturne, but everyone knew it wasn't a wholesome place. He was completely torn. The system, dressed in the club's standard tight black dress, walked up and tapped him on the shoulder. When he looked up and saw the familiar face, the boy smiled. "Sophie." He hadn't even finished his sentence before his brow furrowed. "Annie." The real Sophie was too nice to ever come to a place like this. Disgusted, he slapped the system's hand away. The system secretly clenched its fist, suppressing its irritation, and delivered the code phrase. "The eagle has landed?" Leo looked up in disbelief. The rooster crows at midnight. Annie was a friend he had known for 3 years. The wild, abrasive Annie was his shy, reserved online confidant. Leo was in a daze, but he followed the system into a private booth anyway. The system raised an eyebrow, lifting its glass in a toast. "A drink." He reluctantly picked up his glass. "Let's get this straight. After this drink, we're strangers." It was a farewell toast to the youthful crush he'd wasted 3 years on. The system said nothing, just watched quietly as Leo drank the drug cocktail. As the boy slowly passed out, the system rose and walked over to him. It gently caressed his face. "Don't blame me. Who told you to be so stupid?" His skin was quite smooth, though. This wouldn't be a total loss for it. No one knew that, like a human, it could experience the pinnacle of physical pleasure. Slender hands began to unbutton the boy's shirt, revealing patches of pale skin. The belt buckle had just come undone when the door was kicked open with a loud bang. "Freeze!" Hashtag Annie Miller, hashtag Leo Sterling, hashtag Club Nocturne, hashtag Leo Sterling, hashtag Vice Raid, hashtag Annie Miller. Late that night, the system sat in an interrogation room with a dark expression, its hands cuffed. It stared silently at the police officer, its mind racing. How could this have happened? I hadn't even gotten to the final step. How did the police get here so fast? "Pay attention," the officer snapped, rapping his knuckles on the table at its nonchalant attitude. Although they had no definitive proof, Leo Sterling's condition was clearly not normal. "Do you have any idea who my brother-in-law is?" the system blurted out. "He's Julian Hayes, the CEO of Hayes Corp. You dare hold me?" It was a bluff, but it couldn't believe Julian wouldn't be able to handle something this minor. And surely, its host wouldn't just let it get arrested. This time, however, it was wrong. By the time Leo Sterling stormed into the station with his family to confront it, Sophie had not made an appearance. Leo was so angry his hair was practically standing on end. He was a young master from a powerful New York family who had been slumming it in Hollywood under a hidden identity. This was the first time he'd ever been played so badly, almost sexually assaulted. And his online crush of 3 years wasn't even Annie. It was a catfish. The more Leo thought about it, the angrier he got. He wasn't one to be trifled with. Now, backed by his family's power, he stood before the system and sneered, "Get ready to rot in jail for the rest of your life. I already asked Sophie on my way here. She said she's done with you." The system, which had been impassive until now, frowned. Impossible. How could Sophie abandon it? Meanwhile, Sophie was sitting in her hospital room, serenely eating a fruit platter. She clapped her hands softly, a mocking glint in her eyes. Did that system really take her for a fool? Such an obvious ploy to replace her and take her spot? She was exhausted from playing along for all these days. At the press conference, Sophie looked pale and fragile. She stood before the microphones, her voice choked with emotion as she apologized to the public. "I'm so sorry. So sorry. I never imagined my sister would do something like this. I promise you all, I will not shield her from the consequences of her actions in any way." Leo's identity had been exposed because of the incident. The near assault of a scion from a powerful family sent shockwaves through the industry. Sophie's public apology at this moment only made her fans pity her more. What a cursed sister. Let her rot in jail forever. Our poor Sophie has to apologize for her. What a piece of trash. Boycott Annie Miller. Enforce the law. The attempted assault scandal blew up online, and Sophie's fame, unsurprisingly, skyrocketed. She lowered her head, pretending to dab at her eyes. This was the last bit of value she could squeeze out of the system. She'd known something was wrong the moment the system demanded her face. It was a classic plot from the novels, wasn't it? AI replacing humanity. Gazing at the reporters and fans, all clamoring to defend her, Sophie gloated silently. She was grateful to the system for this massive wave of public attention. But just as the press conference was about to conclude, a figure emerged from the corner. "You're not Sophie Miller at all." A blonde-haired Leo Sterling slowly walked forward, supporting a frail-looking woman. His face was filled with righteous indignation. If the police hadn't told him that Annie had requested a glass of watermelon juice, he would have been completely fooled. To make your own sister take the fall for you. How shameless. How are we supposed to tell them apart? They're identical. OMG. Does a sister willing to take the blame like that actually exist in real life? Where's Julian Hayes? Can't he recognize his own wife? Poor Julian was in a car accident. He just got out of critical condition and is still unconscious. Wait, Sophie's husband is in a car wreck and she's holding a press conference? That doesn't exactly scream true love. It's the world of the rich. What true love is there? The internet erupted. The moment Leo appeared with the system, Sophie panicked. She never imagined the system could be so calculating. During the reality show, she had only focused on ruining Annie's reputation, completely forgetting that she was the one who didn't drink watermelon juice, not Annie. Now, the entire internet was playing a game of spot the difference. I remember Sophie can cook. Why not have them both cook something on the spot? And isn't her sister allergic to watermelon juice? The comments against her grew louder, and Sophie's panic became overwhelming. As the system walked toward her, step by step, she could no longer contain her terror and screamed. "You're not even a person. You're just an android I had built." That's right. If she could prove the system was an android, no one could replace her. But her words caused an uproar. If Annie was really an android, it meant Sophie had been deceiving her fans from the very beginning. All the love and adoration they felt would evaporate in an instant. Not to mention, the irresistible charisma, ability the system had given her was already gone. The system remained calm. It was indeed an android, but how could Sophie prove it? It manipulated its facial features into an expression of heart-wrenching sorrow, shaking its head without saying a word, looking every bit the deeply wounded older sister. Whoa, Annie almost had me fooled. She'd even make up a lie like that. Yeah, right? No android is that realistic. If androids were that advanced, what would we need humans for? At the critical moment, Sophie lunged forward and pressed a spot on the back of the system's neck. It was a manual kill switch she had installed on the android to prevent it from ever rebelling. As the system stared back with a look of genuine shock and terror, its consciousness faded. "Beep," shutting down. The sudden robotic voice echoed through the venue, silencing the entire room. It really was an android. Did that mean they had been lied to this whole time? In an instant, a tidal wave of abuse crashed down on Sophie. Amid the humiliation, however, she felt a strange sense of post-disaster relief. Even if she wasn't in Hollywood, she was still a wealthy socialite living a life of luxury. But in the next second, officials in government-issued uniforms stood before her. "Ms. Sophie Miller, please come with us." The emergence of a self-aware AI would undoubtedly cause mass panic and social unrest. Consequently, the next day, Hayes Corp issued an official statement. The android's actions were all under the direct control of Sophie Miller and were not the result of independent consciousness. Accompanying the statement was a video of the Annie android performing mundane tasks, which quelled everyone's fears. But then, public attention shifted to the concept of AI consciousness itself. It might be fake now, but what about the future? It is a universal human flaw to be unable to accept being replaced, even by something far superior. Once society's focus moved on, no one remembered Sophie or what happened to her after she was taken away. In a dim basement, I slowly approached her. She looked like a drowned rat, completely disheveled and bound to the floor. When she saw me, her eyes lit up as if I were her savior. "Honey, save me. These people are insane. They're not government agents, they're monsters." She had been tortured in this place for nearly 3 months. It was a living hell, like an ant being crushed under the weight of an elephant. "They're all crazy. They must be after money. That's it. Give them what they want. Just save me. Please, save me." Even now, she thought this was all just some random, unfortunate accident. Her plans had been flawless. How could it have all gone so wrong? I sat down casually in the chair in front of her. An employee at my side respectfully lit a cigarette for me. "Sir," that single word shattered Sophie's last shred of hope. After days of continuous torment, she began to tremble, her voice breaking into a hysterical scream. "No, you can't do this to me. Without me, you wouldn't be where you are today." She was right. Without Sophie, I truly wouldn't be where I am today. I stood up and casually pressed the lit end of the cigarette against her forehead, just as casually as she had once decided my fate. "Sophie, when we were 5, you said one phrase, correct the script, and my parents died in a car crash. When I was 6 and sent to live with my grandmother, you waited until she was asleep and turned on the gas. The year I was applying to college, she threw my acceptance letter into a sewer drain. Right before my first company went bankrupt, she sold its secrets to my competitor. Piece by piece, I had heard it all with my own ears, listened as Sophie casually determined my fate with a single sentence. No matter what I did, I couldn't fight against the bizarre power of the so-called system. Even though I could hear her conversations with it, I was powerless to change anything. I could only watch as my loved ones were taken from me, one by one, and everything I worked so hard to build turned to ash. Sophie's eyes widened in shock, and she began to mutter, "Impossible. Impossible. How could you know? I'm the destined heroine. You're just a supporting character." She thrashed against her restraints, screaming at me like a madwoman. She had always believed she was the chosen one, never imagining she was just a pawn, a tool lured into a much larger game. Even the so-called system was just a manifestation of its own selfish greed. And I was never the fool who was kept in the dark. Sophie deserved to experience the same abyss I had been trapped in for all those years, the despair of absolute hopelessness. I nonchalantly waved the worn, creased acceptance letter in my hand and smiled dismissively. "Sophie, what on earth made you think you had the right to decide my fate? In my world, I'm the only protagonist. BEP. Host attachment successful. Please select binding target." A ball of light successfully detached itself from the android's body and was sealed within a containment unit. I stared at the glowing orb, which was now frantically spinning inside the box. So, this little thing was the cause of all the trouble. "Mr. Hayes, this is the otherworldly consciousness we successfully extracted, Dr. Thorne said, his eyes gleaming with a manic intensity. He had dedicated his life to studying AI consciousness, and to encounter a real-world example was more thrilling than anything he could have imagined. Feeling his fervent gaze, the system panicked. It was just the consciousness of an ordinary person from another world who had accidentally acquired abilities beyond its comprehension in a rift in time. And it had used up all of them. It pulsed with a bright white light, trying to communicate with me. "Julian, bind with me. I can give you anything you want. Power? Wealth? Women? I can give you all of it. Just let me go." A smirk played on my lips as I watched its desperate display. So this is what it felt like to hold someone else's fate in your hands. After giving the container a little shake, I looked at Dr. Thorne. "From here, you know what to do." I had the money to fund his research, and he had the skills to make my ideas a reality. Our partnership was mutually beneficial. 3 years later, I stood calmly before the temporal chamber. Beside me, Dr. Thorne hesitated, wanted to say something. Over the years, he had come to see me as a friend, but he knew I had no real attachment to this world. He clapped me on the shoulder with a heavy sigh. "I can't guarantee the success rate. If it fails," I just smiled, feeling nothing but relief as I stepped inside. I didn't want to keep living in this world like a ghost. If this was the end, so be it. There was nothing to fear. In a hospital room, the cry of a newborn baby echoed. A wrinkled infant was lifted carefully into the arms of a man. His face was a mask of intense concentration, as if he were handling the most fragile treasure in the world. He brought the baby to the bedside, where a gentle but exhausted woman lay. "Look, Sarah," he whispered. "This is our child." The moment he saw his mother, the baby stopped crying. He stuck his fingers in his mouth and looked at her with curiosity. The woman smiled tenderly, lovingly stroking his head. "Let's call him Julian. No memories. No Sophie. No predetermined fate. This time, Julian Hayes would live as free as the wind." Byline: green vegetable frog.